But let's begin with the 2025 NFL Draft, which was held last night, first-round style, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And arguably the biggest surprise of the night happened in the first 20 minutes as the Jacksonville Jaguars traded up to select Travis Hunter from the University of Colorado. And in return, the Cleveland Browns get a second-round pick, 36th overall, a fourth-round pick, and a first-round pick next season. Moving up from 5 to 2 really did the Browns a favor here by getting an extra pick from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, by the way, even afterward, was sort of unclear why they took Hunter, considering the fact that they didn't even speak to him after the combine. Very bizarre situation, but needless to say, Hunter, according to reports, will play mostly wide receiver and some cornerback in the National Football League. Here's their head coach, Liam Cohen, talking about all the intangibles that Hunter brings to the table.
Snaps that he takes, the preparation, the accountability, the way that he's in the building at 5 a.m. training his body. He's a 4.0 student and goes out on the field and impacts the game. Right, on both sides of the ball, he impacts the game. He's got a great feel for the game itself. When he's on the offensive side of the ball, finding zones in the defense, he's got really good ball skills. He can do something with it after the catch, and then on the defensive side of the ball, he finds it. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do here is continue to find people that can help us get our hands on the ball on the defensive side and go impact the game in that way.
The other trade in the draft were the New York Giants trading back into the first round to select their quarterback of the future with the 25th overall pick. They took Jackson Dart from Mississippi. The Houston Texans were the pick that they got it from. 34th overall pick was exchanged back to Houston for doing it. Also a third-round pick and a sixth-round pick as well. Most notably, though, in the draft, Shedeur Sanders from the University of Colorado, who was expected to be a first-round pick, was not taken at all in the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. Our coverage again tonight, exclusively here on SportsGrid. We'll see who ends up going in round 2. Don't look now. One of the hottest teams in the NBA in the playoffs got to be Los Angeles Clippers. They dismantled the Denver Nuggets last night. It looks like they are big favorites now to win this series. 117-83, the final. Kawhi Leonard had 21 points and 11 rebounds. The Clippers outscored the Nuggets 23-2 at the end of the first quarter and into the second. This game was sort of over before it started. Nikola Jokic did have a triple-double, 23 points, 13 rebounds, 13 assists, but it was a huge game and the first playoff game in front of the new crowd in the new building in Los Angeles, which certainly inspired the Clippers to play well, according to head coach Ty Lue.
Yes, this is what I was talking about. Like I said, our fans was unbelievable tonight. And just be able to come home, play our first playoff game into a dome, it was very exciting. And our fans came out. They showed up and showed out. And like I said, guys played better, played well. Norm was huge for us tonight, scoring the basketball, but also making the right play in the pick and roll versus the blitzes. And, we got to build off of it. Like I said, it's only 2 games. But today, I liked our approach. I like what we did defensively. And, still going to be a tough series. It ain't over because we, had a blowout. It's only 1 game, so we got to be ready to come and validate that on Saturday.
I mean, we were up with James. He was successful early. He made a couple pull-up threes. And to their credit, they moved the ball side to side. And they had a lot of guys get going at the same time. And I thought after that, we got a little hesitant with what we were trying to do. When you do that, you're going to give up, easy baskets to Zubats. And now all of a sudden we're giving everything up at once. And now you're searching for different coverages. And when you're searching, that's not a good thing. You got to put your head down and do things harder and better. I thought our physicality wasn't good enough. I didn't think on either end. I thought they screened us all over the floor on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, they got into us. They pushed us off our spots, and we didn't respond well to it.
The Memphis Grizzlies covered a spread last night. That's the good news. The bad news is they're down 0-3 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder now up 3-0 in the series, 114-108. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 31 points and 8 assists. Chet Holmgren had 24. Ja Morant was banged up in this one. He only played 19 minutes, fell on a layup, and didn't play after that. Needless to say, it was a very big comeback for OKC. 29 points down, second largest comeback since 1997. And they're in position and 1 win away from moving on. Head coach Mark Daigneault very happy with the second half performance.
we kind of reconnected to who we are. We were very out of character in the first half, and some of that had to do with how well Memphis played and the way they landed the first punch and multiple punches after that. So credit to them. But I just thought our response in a game that doesn't feel attainable in certain parts of it, our response was great.
How much do you think Ja's injury kind of affected the energy of the team going into the second half?
I would say quite drastically from the end result, but not only the energy, but also the execution.
In a season that's finished with, well, not finished quite yet, but has had a lot of hurt towards the end, or recently, I guess, how does this one sit with you personally?
Which part?
The loss and the nature of a big comeback like this.
I think it's very hard to describe it to anyone who's never been in that situation. And everyone who's been in that situation knows how it feels. So that's all I can say.
Weak answer there. Weak answer. Basically telling the reporter he never played the game. Sorry, buddy. You're not going to be long for that team coaching, doing that to the media. I got news for you. All right, Knicks played the Pistons last night. They come up big and take a 2-1 lead in Detroit. Knicks are now up 2-1 in the series. Great game last night. 118-116. Karl Anthony Towns 31. Jalen Brunson 30. Cunningham 24. Knicks led the whole game. Pistons came back to make it close. One more game coming up in Detroit this weekend. Meanwhile, Golden State may be without Jimmy Butler for their next game when they're at home against Houston. He has a deep glute muscle contusion. He is questionable for the game. Best case scenario, because they thought maybe there was some structural damage. Butler usually plays through this stuff. We'll see if he does coming to the weekend. How about the St. Louis Blues? Break it up for them. Everyone thought their series with Winnipeg was over. They put a 7 spot up last night on Jets. 7-2 the final as the Jets beat the Blues, and now the Blues can still come back and potentially tie the series this weekend, although Winnipeg is leading the series after taking care of business in the first 2 games, 2-1. That's the series lead. The Wild take a 2-1 series lead with a 5-2 win over the Vegas Golden Knights. Toronto looks like they'll be moving on in their best-of-7 series against the Ottawa Senators. They take a 3-0 series lead, and the defending champion Florida Panthers go to Tampa Bay and win games. They'll be back home this weekend in Sunrise trying to take a 3-0 series lead. Mike Yastrzemski, Matt Chapman, they homer. The Giants rally past the Brewers in Major League Baseball yesterday on a light schedule, 6-5. Cade Povich gave the Orioles a good pitching performance. Man, did they need that. 6 2/3. They beat the Nationals 2-1. Christopher Morel, 2-run home run in the 10th. The Rays rally to beat the Diamondbacks 7-4. And Brian Wu of Seattle gets a win in Boston, 4-3 the final, as he went 6 innings and gave up 2 runs. Welcome back to NewsWire. We'll get back to the draft here in just a minute with Bill Bender. First, let's check in with Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report. He's got 3 stories to review with us that you can read about over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks again, Pat, for coming on. Great to be with you here on this Friday. Let's get started and talk about the retail shops in Nebraska that are all cheering today because they just found out that there will be no online sports betting, which, obviously we don't like to see. But no business in the sports betting community is good business in a place where you can only go to one spot. They continue to have a monopoly over sports betting in the Cornhusker state.
Well, you say that, but I mean, every time we see a geo-comply report coming out talking about the geo-targeting or geo-pings or whatever they're tracking, they always see a cornfield over in Missouri that's gets a lot of action from people in Omaha. So, I don't know if they're all going to the retail spots, but yeah, in Nebraska, we had kind of high hopes for legislation to get through. Based on last year, there was a special session that there was talk of a sports betting bill that would get through to help relieve property tax burden on residents. It didn't make any noise really in that special session, but Governor Jim Pillen came out in support of it, saying, hey, this is something we should look at and do. Maybe it'll be a priority bill this year. Either case, it came out. It got some traction. It got through a committee. There was lots of opposition, which I don't think we're surprised by anymore in any of these states that are left to go online. But it still got through that committee. It got through its first of 3 floor votes in the Nebraska legislature, which is a unicameral body. And from that point, it was like, okay, well, these next 2, you need to reach that 30 vote threshold. And there were 6 senators absent from that first vote. And Elliot Bostar, the senator who sponsored the bill, said, I've got at least 3. So, there's your 30. Well, the thing that kind of throws that for a loop here is when there's a filibuster in Nebraska, you need 33 votes to get that through. And sure enough, he did not have those votes, was not sure he could meet those votes. So he went ahead and pulled the legislation. And so now we're waiting for next year. Now, the thing here is that if it would have passed, it would have gone to the voters in 2026. So, you've got next session as well. The legislation does carry over. So I think there's hope maybe that in the next year they can figure out how do you get a couple more votes in the Senate and then get it to the ballot in 2026. There's also the thought, there were a couple senators who have talked about it in committee hearings and in the local media say, we want to get ahead of this. We want to get this passed because there could be a ballot initiative led by the operators. And the operators would then get to kind of pick and choose what they're going for. And of course, we saw that in Missouri this last year. They led a very expensive ballot initiative and got it to the ballot. Barely passed with 50.05% of the votes, but it still passed. But we'll see. I mean, the voters in Nebraska did approve casinos in 2020, which includes, as you mentioned, in-person sports betting. So yeah, interesting in Nebraska, but it was one of those states that we were like, oh, this is certainly a possibility this year to go online. Of course, it fell apart here, but hey, we'll see what happens the next year. It may still be on the ballot in 2026.
Yeah, you never know. And as we kind of get through first quarter of the year, now the second quarter, it does appear that by the end of the year, Pat, the only state that could potentially legalize sports betting may be Hawaii, which is just a huge surprise. Maybe later in the year in November to see where things stand, but it appears as though there isn't a lot of opposition right now, which certainly surprised a lot of people, considering it's a place a lot of people vacation, that they would accept this coming through. I got to tell you, this will be the story of the summer as far as a potential state legalizing sports betting.
This certainly would be the story of the legislative session in sports betting, online gambling, really, because, no one expected Hawaii to kind of be this dark horse that just comes through and legalizes. I mean, they're one of 2 states without any legal form of gambling, including Utah. And in the past, the most a sports betting bill did was pass a committee. And this year it passed multiple committees and the House, and then multiple committees in the Senate and the Senate. And right now, what happened was initially in the House where it originated, they stripped the online sports betting tax rate and license fee. And they were talking, they said, well, maybe these are too low. Let's keep this discussion going. Let's strip it and push it forward. What happened was in the Senate, they just put those original figures back and then they passed it, sent it back to the House. The House said, wait, we stripped these out because we wanted them to be higher, basically. And so now we're going to conference committee. We've got the members of the conference committee. They need to meet and iron it out. And that has to happen by May 2nd when the legislature adjourns. And now there isn't, to your point, a lot of pushback at this point because both chambers have passed it. And the governor came out this week and said, hey, I'm for this. As long as we have the right protections in place, this is a good thing. So with the governor on board, both legislative bodies saying, yeah, let's go for it. And they just need to find that right tax rate and license fees. And then looks like we may have sports betting in Hawaii, to your point, at the end of the year. We'll see. It could become a race of who launches first, Missouri or Hawaii.
Yeah, true.
We don't know yet, but it would be the legislation has at least 4 sports books. And it sounded like the other day in the Boyd earnings call, which I did not listen to, which they came out initially against Hawaii sports betting in this process because they've got a great tourism business going back and forth between Hawaii and Las Vegas. It sounds like from their earnings call that they would be eager to launch a sports book in Hawaii. So, even the people who came out against it are seemingly kind of okay with it. So we'll see where it goes. It doesn't seem like, to your point, there's opposition standing in its way at this point. It's just, can legislators get out of their own way and kind of iron it out and make sure it's what they want and make sure it's good for the Aloha
Yeah.
State.
Yeah, definitely so. Okay, so new bill in Colorado coming. You could read about this story over at Legal Sports Report. This would be a trendsetter here. And by the way, not a horrible idea in the state to start trying to tax some of these promo spends. I mean, it's basically what's building the sports books at this point. They're capturing all these new people, obviously, who are betting on sports, and they're all signing up. But it's the promos that are getting people to come back over and over again. And by taxing that, uh, I mean, I guess it could accomplish one of two things. Either the states will get more money or the promos will stop.
Yeah, Colorado's kind of an interesting case in this is, they launched with a 10% tax and they allowed promo deductions. Uh, and then, they've slowly seen their tax rate increase or their taxes increase. They didn't do anything with the tax rate, but it started to increase the haul. And then when they initially passed it, they put a cap of $30 million of tax revenue. And that just was voted to be removed by Coloradans in November. So they've got that coming. Now this bill in here would probably bump up their tax rate, their tax revenue by about $11-12 million a year, which is nice because it all goes towards Colorado River projects. And, they love their rivers. They want to make sure everything's all nice. They need to make sure they have water for a long time. And $11 million in a lot of governmental uses doesn't seem like a lot. It might be a lot for Colorado water projects. So that's kind of what they're looking at. Colorado is one of the lowest for sportsbook operators, one of the lowest percentages of promos. Like they don't spend a lot in promos in Colorado. So I don't think it'll change that much in that sense. So yeah, it's an interesting bill. It's an interesting way to go about maybe increasing your tax revenue a little bit more rather than, like we've talked about, a lot of states raising the tax rates. This is just a nice little way to maybe boost that income a little bit more for the states.
Yeah, could be. Pat, great stuff as always this week. Look forward to catching up again next week on NewsWire. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks as always, Craig. Enjoy the draft this weekend.